It is election day in America, and one big question today and beyond: how much political influence does the president have over his party right now? And what does he mean, and how much will he factor in the midterms come November? The president's approval rating hit a new second-term low in the latest New York Times poll, something we should talk about. CNN's Harry Enten is running the numbers. The New York Times poll had a lot of people talking.
Oh, it did.
What are they talking about?
What are they talking about? I mean, look, the bottom line is this. There's been all this talk about, oh, Donald Trump has this floor. Well, I'll tell you, that floor looks like it was built by the worst carpenters I've ever seen, because he just keeps falling through that floor. And it's not just the New York Times poll. This is what I think is so important. Yes, the Times poll got people talking, but it just follows a slew of polling data that all shows the same thing, and that is that Donald Trump is not just under 40%, he's well under 40% in terms of his approval rating. 37% New York Times. CBS came out on Sunday, 37%. Ipsos, 36%. Our CNN poll, 35%. You put it all together, and it is just very clear at this point that Donald Trump is hitting new lows in his polling data, and this one poll is no outlier. It is part of a much larger trend, Kate Baldwin.
You talked about sub 40. So put that in like a historical context then. What does it look like for president?
Yeah, okay. So you see sub 40, sub 40, sub 40, sub 40. Well, you go back in term twos, right, for different presidents, and there are only other two presidents who were sub 40 at this point in term two. And what happens in the midterm elections? Well, sub 40 approval ratings besides Trump at this point in term two. Well, one was Richard Nixon back in 1974. His party absolutely got crushed in the 1974 midterm elections, suffered huge losses, House and Senate. How about George W. Bush back in 2006? His party lost the House. His party lost the Senate. Again, 30-seat loss in the House for George W. Bush in 2006. A 6-seat loss in the United States Senate. So historically speaking, of course, we'll have to just wait and see what happens here. Yeah. But historically speaking, Kate Baldwin, when you have a president who has a sub-40 approval rating at this point, their party goes down to defeat in the midterm elections. Big losses for Nixon in 74 with the Republican Party, and Bush's Republican Party lost both the House and the United States Senate.
So the party suffers. What has history shown? Do the presidents recover?
Yeah, okay. Do these presidents ever recover? Let's look beyond just the midterm elections. Let's talk about legacy, right? The idea, hey, you know what? We still got more than 2 years' time until the end of Donald Trump's second term. But again, you just go back and look at the sub-40 approval ratings besides Trump. Did their approval rating ever recover? Well, I try and make it as simple here sometimes. Sometimes it's numbers, sometimes simply put it's words. The answer is no. In red, Nixon, of course, was out by August of 74. He ended up with, a 24% approval rating. And George W. Bush, you know what happened to him by the end of his term in 2009? He was actually in the high 20s. He wasn't just sub 40. He was in the 20s. Both Bush and Nixon ended up in the 20s in approval rating. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Donald Trump. This is a sample size of 2, but this is history that you definitely don't want to be a part of. You do not want to be part of this brotherhood. You want to be way, way, way beyond it, because if Donald Trump is a part of this brotherhood, that means he ended his term historically unpopular.
Harry Enten, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate.
Let's just look at some of the polling that's come out recently, because it's really bad for the president. Mm-hmm. If you look at it, how Trump is handling his job as president among registered voters. I mean, there's the numbers there. Trump's handling of the war in Iran. Those numbers are very similar to his handling of the job as a whole, with 65% of people disapproving. Will this go to help him or hurt him as he's continuing to do this thing where he says, I'm going to attack. Okay, now I'm not going to attack. And it's all been done sort of to the public, but not to Congress. Peter?
No, it's been done to the public, but that is also the fact that we're not sitting in the negotiation rooms, and whether that's happening in Islamabad, whether that's happening with emissaries from Qatar, from Oman, or whether that's in other channels that the U.S. has, we're only seeing the tip of this much, much, much more delicate regional and specific picture. Frankly, time is very much not on the Iranian side from their longevity as a regime. Time is also not on this administration side, just when it comes to gas prices in the midterm. So the fact that the president is holding off, I think, does send a signal that there could be a far more significant development in the short term, especially coming on the heels of the president's trip to China, where Xi Jinping, very notably, And the Chinese government, Xi Jinping, does not like to get into domestic affairs of other countries because they don't want anyone talking about their Uyghur problem or anything else. Or I should say their horrific treatment of the Uyghurs and the human rights abuses. But Xi Jinping said Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. We agree on that component, and the Strait of Hormuz should be open. That's a very significant concession.
But
And
he didn't
Chinese
offer anything to open.
Well, let me-
Well, what is he going to
Yeah,
do?
but let me challenge that.
They are suffering economically. The Chinese retail consumption was 3 points off expectations yesterday. It was 0.2%, barely grew year over year.
I mean, there's a lot
The
that China
Chinese
can
are
do to
suffering.
pressure Iran.
Yeah.
I mean, including turning off their intel sharing with Iran to target American troops.
That would be
that would be a
wonderful.
big one.
Right. But right now, the Chinese are suffering from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Course, of
Maybe
course.
not more than other folks in Asia,
Yeah.
but certainly a heck of a lot more.
But I
in the
think this
United
administration
States.
wanted to walk away from that summit with Xi Jinping with a win to say that, yes, the Chinese president is in fact going to put pressure on Iran. And they didn't get that.
There was additional daylight that grew up. While the Chinese, while Xi Jinping and Donald Trump were talking, the Iranians seized a Chinese flagged ship and impounded it. I mean, some of the messages coming out of Iran of like, this is a betrayal of the alliance that we had. I mean, that daylight, it may not be a mile wide, but if it was a crack, I mean, you can see to the other side.
I do want to mention that the Chinese Xi Jinping had said this before this meeting with Trump, that the Strait of Hormuz should be open. Obviously, China's suffering as well in a much bigger way, even than the United States. And, that they would like to see a closure to this war.
Yeah, but the nuclear component and Iran not being a nuclear power, that was a significant development.
Cornel, how do you see this and the way this war is being handled? Because Americans are very, very concerned about it, especially since it's gone on far longer than they were expecting, than they were told.
I always try to look at the world through the lens of the least of these, the people who are suffering the most vulnerable. And so when I look in Iran, I see people dealing with execution, subjugation, domination, repression. They're human beings like anybody else. I say the same thing about Gaza and genocide. I say the same thing about black folk in Harlem. Same thing about poor whites in Kentucky. There's got to be a moral and spiritual lens. And when you look through the world through moral and spiritual lens, which for me as a Christian, look at the world through the lens of the cross, it looks like you're always headed toward crucifixion, because they're the ones who get crucified for the most part. You see, the everyday people, the poor people, and so we see the gangsters at the top manipulating, playing power politics, crushing the people in their own respective contexts, and we end up with a dialogue that's deodorized at the top, that hiding the funk of the suffering and the unbelievable blood that's flowing. So in that sense, I have a critique across the board, but when I see the war, it's an illegal, it's an immoral war, but at the same time, I see an immoral regime in Iran. You see?
You're saying two things can be true at the same time.
Two things can be true at the same time.
How is this going to play out, you think, if this war continues to linger on? Obviously, the gas prices and all the cost of the war to the American public, to the regular person, hitting pretty hard. How do you see this playing out for the midterms? Do you think it's going to...
It's not good for Republicans. It's not good for Trump. I mean, the numbers don't lie, and the numbers have been fairly consistent. I don't know how many regular Americans who are trying to put food at the table, who are taking care of their children, who are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet, are really following every development of this war. I think most people are like, just wake me up when it's over, and it's not over. Every day it lingers on more and more. I also think, when I see and read these threats by Trump, it's a little reminiscent of Taco, right? Trump always chickens out. It's a little, this is the same guy who threatened Iran with complete eradication of their civilization during the Easter weekend. So it's like the little president who cried wolf a little too much. And I think something we can all agree on is that the messaging around this war has been disorganized, undisciplined, and not very effective. And I think that this zigzagging and threatening and screaming, at the kids in the yard by Trump doesn't help the messaging issue.
Do you think it's been disorganized and the messaging just kind of all over the place?
Look, I think the president's been pretty clear. His number one objective is he does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That's been his top priority. He said it again today. He says it virtually every day. He didn't really make a political decision. He made a national security decision, which is what we elect commanders-in-chief to do. He decided that they were on the brink of getting a nuclear weapon. He wasn't going to permit it. It's his red line, and he is enforcing it. And he's really sort of set politics aside. I mean, the polling is pretty clear on it, but he has kind of set politics aside and said, I can't worry about politics all the time. Sometimes I have to worry about national security. And that's his choice. And a lot of this rests on his shoulder. Respectfully, if I might disagree regarding chickening out, I don't think the top level of the Iranian regime that we took out in the opening hours of this war would think that he chickened out. Probably don't see it that way right now. We inflicted massive military damage against the top layer of Iranian leadership, against their military sites, and so on and so forth. We have sunk their navy. We have set them back years upon years upon years in terms of what they would like to do to be able to export terror around the world. The final thing is, can you get to a deal where you can guarantee to the American people no nuclear weapons for these butchers? If we get there, that is a victory. And I think if we get there soon, the American
Yeah, but
people will see that as a
he
good
thinks
thing.
he can use pressure tactics like he did in Venezuela, like
Which
he's
worked.
doing. Like he's doing, they did.
Well, this is a very different country.
He took Maduro out, but there's still
Same
political
regime was there.
prisoners
Yeah.
there,
Same regime.
and a lot of
Alex
the
Saab was just
Venezuelans.
extradited
So do not
today.
claim that Venezuela is a victory. It's not. It's yet.
Trump's got an 80% approval rating in Venezuela right now.
That's not true. And let me just tell
it's
you
true,
this.
yeah.
Let me tell you this. The woman who was the party who was legally elected in Venezuela is
Delcy
somewhere out in
Rodriguez.
exile because he has
Moreno.
made a pact with Maduro's number two. And Maduro's worst executors are still running around free in Venezuela, terrorizing the Venezuelan people. There are still political prisoners. But he thought that he could, he used all sorts of scare tactics with Venezuela. He's using all sorts of scare tactics to tighten the screws on Cuba. But those are, smaller countries without a real military and really not much of an option but to fold. Iran is a completely different game, and I think these scare tactics of his just are not having the same effect because they have an incredible tolerance, more than I thought they would have, of enduring pain and pressure.
Butchery. You got butchery in Gaza. You got butchery on the West Bank. You got butchery in Tehran. You got butchery going on. If all we're doing is just butchery, is butchery all the way down. What does that mean? It's over. People reach a point where they have a contempt for humanity. We no longer have the capacity to express love, care, and concern for others, let alone the least of these. That's what's sad. It's butchery all the way down, though, brother.
But in our case, we're taking on the butchers. The case of
No, but
Iran's
America
regime,
has this history of butchery, too.
They butcher their own people. They drag them out into the street.
That's
They
true.
hang them. They
That's
behead
true.
them.
40,000 this year.
If women
That's true.
don't wear the right clothes, or they take
true.
off their.
That's exactly right. We got butchery and
it's
slavery and
terrible.
Jim Crow and lynching. We got butchery in Gaza. You got butchery in Venezuela. You got, this is Jonathan Swift all the way down, all right? We're on the way to misanthropy.
Should we have looked the other way on Iran?
I think that we could come up with ways of minimizing the butchery.
You know
Yes.
what? On that,
yes,
I
think
actually
we
think
can. I think we
Operation
can.
Midnight Hammer
think
was so successful and was so well executed and done that they were on their back foot. And I think if the president had started from negotiating from there and not launched this war, because at the end of the day, Iran doesn't have a navy, but they closed the strait, and they still close the strait. And so I think if the president had done a recalculation of starting from Midnight Hammer and going from there to the negotiating table, it would be we'd be having a different
We did, though.
conversation.
We sent Witkoff and Kushner, and they came in and said, our opening position is we have enough material to make 11 nuclear bombs. They communicated to the president that they had no intention of giving up their nuclear material or their pursuit
The
of
nuclear
nuclear
facilities
weapons.
that were
That's
hit
the
in
red
Operation
line.
Midnight Hammer are still in the same place that they were
I
in this
agree.
war because we haven't hit them.
Well,
So we have not actually hit their nuclear arsenal.
I mean, we dramatically destroyed their facilities last year, but their intentions, their material, their idea, these are
Their intentions are going to,
fanatics.
I mean, you talked about this president not launching a political war, but he did. I mean, he took out the Ayatollah. That changed political leadership in the country. But I think the miscalculation here is how ingrained the IRGC is into the Iranian society and the hold that they have. That's not going to change with
But also
a few
economically
bombs.
dependent on a lot of the facilities that have been struck, like their steel production
Yes,
facilities.
They are, but they are still holding their position even with all of the suffering that's going on in the country. We will leave this there.